have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Some sense. Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And, you know, just as we finished taping last week, there was the school shooting in Florida that took 17 lives. But we've been gratified and encouraged to see all the unprecedented student activism that has taken place since then.
And because we're old, we see the line that stretches from other movements, and we'll draw some of those parallels as we discuss it. Meanwhile, out gay athletes at the Olympics continue to make worldwide news.
You may have noticed Billy Graham being praised in the media these days. Well, he is dead at 99, and he was virulently anti-gay, but his even more bigoted son, Franklin, survives him.
That line continues. Trump has nominated a man for Wisconsin's federal bench who called same-sex marriage an assault on nature.
I wonder if he'll get through. Now, Catholic bishops in this country get money to aid refugees, and they went ahead and denied lesbians the right to serve as foster parents for refugees, and Lambda is suing them, and HHS.
A Georgia man arrested for sodomy in 1997, when it was illegal, can't get off the sex offense registry, even though that's no longer a crime.
Bermuda is being sued for rescinding marriage equality.
Putin is appealing to Russian homophobia to get people to the polls.
We told you about how it's very hard for people on PrEP to get long-term insurance now from a lot of companies. Well, New York State is investigating that denial.
And Andy and I had a fun night seeing Jerry Springer the Opera, a revival off Broadway.
Yes.
We'll tell you about that.
Well, we start with the the news, the thing that's been dominating the news everywhere, and that is the Florida shooting and what students have done. And this activism from these students has happened so fast and is so powerful that we can just step aside and let it happen.
We have a couple of pictures of students from Parkland leading nationwide protests.
There's a bunch of them. They made the rounds on the morning talk shows on Sunday. These are the ones the right wing calls crisis actors, of course,
yes.
Trying to disparage them.
Yes, they've had to defend the fact that they're actually students at the school yeah. and not people who've rushed in to pretend to be. But they've spoken on a daily basis everywhere.
But the thing is, in the midst of their grief, and that's all, of course, Republicans want to talk about is, oh, this is not the time. They immediately sprang into action. While the funerals were going on, they were taking a bus up to Tallahassee to lobby and, of course, get rebuffed. While they wouldn't do gun control, they would ban, what did they ban? Porn access for young people.
Yes, in the Florida legislature. But as right at the day after the shootings happened, other students and activists showed up at the White House to do what we used to call a die-in, but they're calling a lie-in here. In front of the White House to demand gun control. Now, you talk about the immediate reaction by the students out of anger. They are angry that they are being made vulnerable like this right. and being killed. And it reminded me very much of ACT UP and the AIDS activist movement because ACT UP and AIDS activism happened because mostly gay white men who thought they had privilege were shocked to find they didn't when their government and their neighbors and family were content to let them die.
Yes, it got a lot of white gay men from like Fire Island crowd who were not politically involved, because they
because they were angry.
Well, they were angry, but they were also found out that the government wouldn't do anything for them. The government wanted them to die.
But they were privileged enough to be offended by that and to have the means to fight back. So many times, people who are oppressed and are being deprived by their government or their communities of their rights don't have the privilege to fight back and get mown down if they try to. But the men of ACT UP, the people who were infected, who were personally affected, like the demonstrators against the Vietnam War who were subject to the draft, people who are personally affected do get angry and fight back, and that is what I see here with these students. And of course, drawing then everyone else in with them who cares about these issues and who wants to fight back.
If only Donald Trump had been drafted, history could have been different.
Well, they tried, but he got out of it 5 times.
Bone spurs.
He was a little too privileged. But their anger and their I hate describing people as articulate because it sounds condescending in some way, but they are so smart and so well-spoken and so angry.
Well, it's
and
important
so
to be articulate.
Yes.
It's important to be able to say what it is. I mean, otherwise you kind of go on these shows and you're sort of led by the interviewers. Oh, you must be feeling terrible. Oh, what do you really want? But they know what they want. They come in with an agenda and they say it. No, we don't want any nonsense. We want to cut through that. We want a ban on assault weapons.
And let's not forget that for the civil rights movement in the South in the 50s and 60s, the leaders and strategists of that movement sat down and very carefully plotted taking school children one day out of school and having them march in the streets, knowing they would be attacked by the cops, by the dogs, by the fire hoses,
yes,
and arrested, and that those would be images that would galvanize the country. So young people have been at the forefront of these movements, have been the trigger for national reaction in a way that's been very productive.
This is a very socially conscious school named for a woman who was active in
environmentalists
and in gun control.
Yeah.
And they, I think that they're not coming into this cold. I think they've been learning about this. I mean, one of the teachers was teaching a Holocaust class at the time that the shooting broke out.
Well, clearly they have some knowledge of what it means to fight back and to demand their rights, although they have some conflicting agenda items. Some get up there and want to control guns more than others.
But they know enough to say, if you don't do what we want, we are going to vote you out.
And they also know enough to say that this is going to be a long-term effort and we're not going to change things overnight. We are taping on Wednesday midday before Trump has had his meeting, supposedly, with students. It's hard to imagine that's even going to take place, but it's scheduled. It's supposed to happen. I'm very eager to go home and see the results of that, but we won't be able to talk about it till next week.
But there are, you've heard about the things that are scheduled, so mark your calendars. On March 14th, there's a national student walkout at 10 a.m., wherever you are at 10 a.m. on March 14th. Walk out of school, teachers, but they're also asking us to walk out of work for 17 minutes in honor of the 17 kids who died.
And there's going to be another one of those in April. I think they're going to do them every month.
And then the big thing is March 24th, and you can organize something in your city. There's a big march on Washington, which Oprah and George Clooney and Amal and all these people are pouring money into. But the great thing is that George Clooney and Amal are saying, we'll give you $500,000. We don't want to speak. We want it to be nothing but student speakers.
Right. At
this thing.
Now,
and then something on April 20th as well, a National Day of Action.
There is, if any of you are seeing this before Thursday evening, there is a special meeting of Gays Against Guns here in New York at the LGBT Center at 7:30 to discuss strategy and reactions. And the Gilbert Baker Gays Against Guns rainbow banner showed up at the rally in Tallahassee today.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
Gays Against Guns was in the office of John Cornyn when this shooting took place.
Yep.
Trying to get
in
him
Washington,
trying to get him to do that little tiny thing that he didn't do after the last shooting. And then they were on the streets the very next night in New York. And then, of course, we also have...
And Gays Against Guns started because of the Pulse massacre a year and a half ago in Orlando, Florida.
Well, we want not a moment's peace for the NRA gun runners in the Congress.
Well, there is, and Nadine Smith, who is the executive director of Equality Florida, the statewide LGBT group, came up with a fantastic idea, which everyone across the country is joining in on, which is this No NRA Money campaign that not only are these kids talking about voting these politicians out of office, but rather than going to politicians and saying, don't take NRA money, the campaign is, if you take NRA money, we are not voting for you.
Right, but here, people have to be sophisticated about this because, yes, the NRA makes major donations to candidates, lots, but the main money they spend, like they're going to do against Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, they spend millions of dollars separately, not in coordination with the Republican campaign, to defeat the ones they want to defeat.
$30 million on behalf of Trump in the 2016 campaign.
Some of it in collusion with the Russians.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not making this up. That's what happened in that election.
But if you want to look at that more closely, you can go to nonramoney.org to find out about this new campaign.
And, you know, there was a teacher who was passing by a hotel where there was a Paul Ryan fundraiser.
Key Biscayne.
And she went in there and confronted him and, I'm not here to talk about issues. I'm the Speaker of the House.
I'm the Speaker of the House. I'm at a fundraiser for my political future and the political future of these candidates I'm supporting.
This is not the time or place.
Don't ask me about issues.
We will fight them at their fundraisers. We will picket. We will sit in their offices. We will picket their homes. We will never surrender.
And we will show up at the Trump ice rink in Central Park in New York City, as members of Rise and Resist did last week. We have a couple of pictures there, and they formed themselves into a couple of little lines. This one, they had letters on their chest that spelled out resign, and they did another one, resist. This is at the ice rink in Central Park.
And this was about immigration stuff that they were protesting. ICE, get it? And
that's true.
But there were some encouraging things that happened this week. The United States Supreme Court refused to hear a challenge to California's law that says you got to wait 10 days to get a gun. And the only one who was upset about it was
Clarence Thomas.
What else? By the way, the other thing that Gays Against Gun did, when they demonstrated the night after the massacre in Florida, they went to the David Koch Theater at Lincoln Center because David Koch is a major funder of the NRA for their political efforts. Mm-hmm.
So there's plenty to do, and it can be done with very few people at a time, and it needs to be done all over the country, locally, just like the women's marches have been so impactful, as they say, because they happen everywhere. And so these actions for gun control, immigration, whatever, need to take place in as many venues as possible.
And I love the connections immediately, without any prompting from us, that a lot of these young people made with the LGBT movement in the beginning. I mean, one of the more prominent students, Cameron Kasky, said there's a segment of society that will shrug this off, the massacre, and send their thoughts and prayers, but march for hours over a rainbow wedding cake. And they've been constantly citing LGBT rights.
Meaning the right-wingers who will march against us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
My thought is just escaping.
Right.
Even the news commentators, in their attempts to tie all this history together, have talked about this gun control movement after the Parkland massacre as analogous to marriage equality and other movements, as something that has sprung up out of nowhere. Well, no, not exactly, but yes, the same vigor.
I heard one of the young people saying, the LGBT, it took the LGBT movement a long time, but they got everything. Well, not quite, and it can be taken away.
Yes.
And is being taken away by the Trump administration.
And people all over the country. More on that as we go through our list of stories.
But, we do. Obviously it was a horror in Florida, but there is a lot of good news coming out of that has shaken people up. And we do want to give you some good news. And let's talk about the Olympics.
Okay. Let's talk about the Olympics. Well, Adam Rippon, in spite of getting just one bronze team medal, continues to be a star. So much so that Sally Field is trying to hook him up with her son.
The Times did a big spread about you can have abs like Adam Rippon. How did he accomplish that?
Oh, and I'm intrigued by the fact that NBC offered him a job as a commentator and he turned it down.
He said, I learned about this on Twitter. I don't want to do this. I want to support my teammates.
Right.
Good for him. He's so independent.
Yeah. But he is showing up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in April to accept an award at the Pennsylvania Youth Action Conference. So head for Harrisburg if you want to see
And you're always
Adam.
welcome here, Adam, if you happen to watch the show. You're always welcome here. We're here Wednesday afternoons taping. We'd love to have you.
Turns out there are, according to Outsports, 15 out LGB athletes at the Winter Games, the most ever at the Winter Games, and the first out men at the Winter Games. Now, by contrast, at the Summer Olympics 2 years ago, there were 56 out athletes. So there's something about winter and summer.
And then there's Gus Kenworthy, who didn't have such a great Olympics. He got a big bruise on his butt, but
Hip.
Hip, okay.
And a broken hand.
But we have a wonderful picture. We think it's a kind of a first for the Olympics of Gus getting kissed on live television by his boyfriend Matthew Wilkes. Right there on live TV, which he was thrilled about. He just said they didn't anticipate this, they didn't stage this or anything. It's just what people naturally do, and there it is. And I ask our right-wing viewers, did your screen crack when that happened? Did the Lord send fire and brimstone?
Well,
no.
Gus's mother is thrilled with him. She and Gus's entourage were all there cheering him on, waving rainbow flags, and tremendously enthusiastic, and all that showed up on TV too.
But this has gotten the right wing riled up, and some troll posted, to Gus, if men marry men and women marry women, who will produce in this world? And Gus immediately responded, hopefully not you.
Who will reproduce?
Yes.
Yes. That was a little swallowed. Team Canada, they were going to have a pride house. You know how at the Olympics in the last few years they've had these pride houses that are little community centers for the LGBT athletes. And they were going to have one, but then South Korea decided not to do that. So Team Canada took it up, and they hosted the LGBT athletes at their own little pride house at the Team Canada headquarters. And I must make one correction. I think I said last week that the Dutch speed skater Irene Wust had won the most
Speed skating?
or the most medals at a Winter Olympics. She has won the most speed skating medals and the most LGBT medals,
Yes.
and she's terrific.
Yes. Should we run Gus's ad?
Oh yeah.
Gus did a, well, you'll see what it's for. Here's a Gus Kenworthy ad.
My shoulders carry more than my country's pride. They carry my community's pride, my family's pride.
Hi, Mom.
And pride in myself. Because shoulders are made for greatness, not dandruff.
You can have hair as good as an extreme gay skier.
Oh, poor Martina Navratilova is looking at that and saying, I was ahead of my time.
She sure
they
was.
They took away all my
Oh,
sponsors.
You made it possible, Martina.
Absolutely. You should be proud. All the early
now,
people should be proud.
Gus also broke his thumb this week in practice, and he said it didn't stop him from competing, but it does prevent me from shaking Pence's hand. So, silver linings, he said. I would never say that. Maybe we should talk about Pence.
Do we have things to talk about with Pence?
Well, I mean, yes, because I mean, there's been he continues to insist that he never doesn't support conversion therapy.
Oh, wait, we have, that's been uncovered. Let me go ahead and
well, I mean, look,
vamp and I'll find
so
this.
we have gone back to his record, and the stuff he has been against in terms of gay rights is complete. I mean, the things that he has especially when he ran for Congress, he said, I want to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because as far as he was concerned, that didn't go far enough. He didn't even want closeted homosexuals in the military.
Damn, I didn't write it down. But the thing is, what we've been debating is his statement that what Adam or Gus were nailing him on was that he had said that we should be defunding HIV and AIDS unless we're willing to spend money on
to change sexual behavior.
Yes,
right, that
and
was the
so
phrase.
we were willing to describe that as ambiguous. Was he talking about conversion therapy, or was he talking about abstinence? And because they had said it was about conversion therapy, and we'd said, well, maybe, maybe not. Let's nail him on other stuff we're more sure of. Well, someone found the whole statement. It was in campaign literature from when he was running years
2000.
ago.
2000, not that many years ago.
Okay. Do you have the full text there?
Well, I have this text, which, and let me just read this because I think this settles everything. I oppose any effort to recognize homosexuals as a discrete and insular minority entitled to the protection of anti-discrimination laws, similar to those extended to women and ethnic minorities. I mean, that encompasses, I think, everything. And you know, I don't have the exact quote on conversion.
Oh wait, I've got it.
You do.
I got
Ann
it.
has it.
Well, I had it under AIDS news. Federal dollars should not be given to organizations that celebrate and encourage the types of behaviors that facilitate the spreading of the HIV virus. Resources should be directed to those institutions which provide assistance to those seeking to change their sexual behavior.
Yes.
And that is about gay people.
But I also want to remind you, he was for some good things back then, resisting attacks on the internet, supporting the International Space Station, and he doesn't support those things anymore in the Trump administration.
Well, speaking of the Trump administration.
Yes.
So Trump has another judicial nominee who is heinous, Gordon Giampietro from Wisconsin.
This guy, this is for the, he said that marriage equality is, quote, an assault on nature and against God's plan. Fully 1/3 of the nominees that Trump has made have explicit anti-LGBT activist records, and they're getting, well, many, almost all of them, a few not. Are getting confirmed.
Of this guy,
we had a
Mr.
Di Pietro with the beard.
Giampietro.
Giampietro.
Yeah.
Yes,
right.
He works for a private company now.
We may be having trouble with that.
I would hope this is the kind that we can stop. He also said that kids in private schools in the District of Columbia succeed, and those in public schools become criminals.
Trump went to private school.
Yes, he did. He went to a military school. That's his entire military record.
This past week, there's an article that's been passed around a lot online as a good summary of Trump's anti-LGBT actions across the board. It was in Politico. So if you're not a regular watcher of Gay USA, in which case you would know all this stuff already, but you want a little summary of his anti-LGBT actions, you can go to Politico.com to look that up.
Now, if it weren't for the constant assaults on our sensibilities, this story might be the biggest story of the week that we would be talking about, which is his affair with this Playboy model, Karen McDougal. It went on for 9 months while he was married to Melania, which is remarkable because I was really through with him after 9 minutes of the inaugural address. I mean, I don't understand how
she's a Republican.
We learned this week that in terms of the trans ban, his ban on trans folks in the military, which today, are they supposed to announce?
They were supposed to announce their new policy today. We haven't heard anything about that.
Well, BuzzFeed obtained emails from the chair of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford, saying, right after Trump's announcement of this in a tweet that he was going to do this, to the other Joint Chiefs, this was unexpected, and I was not consulted. But of course, what Trump said was, I did consult with my generals.
We knew about this.
But those generals were in the Russian army.
I keep wanting to say it was Captain Crunch, but I can't think of the general analogy to that. There's got to be a
General Motors.
Yeah, that would even be too much. Yeah, I don't see anything about the new policy. Well, we should get on to Billy Graham.
Well, I have plenty more Trump stuff.
Well, go ahead.
Well, all right. Well, first of all, it was encouraging to see that he was rated among presidents, and he was rated dead last,
yes.
Except by the Republicans who put Buchanan last because he was a closet homosexual. So the travel ban was ruled unconstitutional again by the Fourth Circuit in a 9-4 vote. I want to talk about politics in general, and the fact that Lambda is now suing HHS and the Conference of Catholic Bishops,
yes,
because a lesbian couple was denied the opportunity to serve as foster parents for refugee children. And they were told by an affiliate of the Catholic bishops who are getting your tax money to run this service, you do not mirror the Holy Family. They were told this. So the bishops are getting...
Your tax dollars at work.
They're getting millions of dollars to perform these discriminatory practices, and Lambda is suing. And then the ICE, we were talking about ICE before, but going after
immigration and customs.
Yeah. They arrested a guy named Ivan Nunez, a Mexican spouse of a guy named Paul Frame in Philadelphia, in the middle of a routine interview. Nunez did come here illegally 8 years ago. He had no criminal record. And ICE says, well, he was removed from the United States in 2010 and he came back, which can be a felony, but he was not charged at the time.
Well, here's what his removal from the U.S. was. He shows up at the border from Mexico, trying to go from Mexico to the U.S. He is rejected at the border for whatever reason. They turn him around and send him back to Mexico. And, and that is defined as being deported from the U.S.
No, he came back a couple of days later knowing he could get in through another agent.
But he's legally married to a U.S. citizen. Why should anyone who is legally married to a U.S. citizen be subject to deportation?
Because you commit that sin, and then we're going to go after you for the rest of your life. That's what happens.
All right. Well, who's the
land of the free and the home of the brave?
Can we talk about the expert on sin?
Sure.
Billy Graham.
I talked to a couple of people who said, I didn't even know he was still alive, but he was 99.
Oh, very much alive. And in fact, in very recent times, was still making anti-LGBT statements. He called us detestable, a sinister form of perversion.
Well, I like it
destroying
anyway.
Civilization.
No matter what he says.
Supported conversion therapy. He said AIDS was a judgment from God.
He supported the anti-gay laws in North Carolina, where he lived.
Yep, and attempts to outlaw same-sex marriage.
And his evil spawn, Franklin Graham, runs the whole thing now. He's much worse than Billy. And his daughter, Anne Graham Lotz, said that God let 9/11 happen because he's upset with transgender people. Oh, well, I didn't know that.
But you will only hear nice things about Billy Graham this week as people mourn his loss. Kathy Lee Gifford was crying this morning on the Today Show.
Well, she would. She was a big evangelical. Kathy Lee Gifford was Anita Bryant's protege. Look up who Anita Bryant was, children.
Went to Oral Roberts University in Oklahoma. But the one thing they do say about Billy Graham is in the tapes from Nixon's Oval Office, there was Billy, who worked with, 98 presidents, supporting Nixon's anti-Semitism.
He agreed with Nixon that Jews controlled the media and were responsible for porn. Jews. And when they confronted him about this, he said, well, there it is, but I don't remember saying that.
Well, it's just...
Well, a
continuation of this horrible system that we have of mixing church and state.
He was not
to the detriment of a great many people in this country.
He preceded the worst of the religious right, but he kind of laid the groundwork for it because he did encourage evangelicals who were in those days they didn't even vote. They were like, we're separate from the world, we don't do this. He encouraged them to reverse their retreat from being social influencers.
Well, and as long as we're on religion, did you know that Focus on the Family is a church?
No.
They have filed with the Internal Revenue Service as a church.
Why don't we become one?
So they don't, well, we should, so that they don't have to file any income tax reports.
We preach every week here, don't we?
Also, Liberty Counsel, the legal organization, which
Is it a church?
is a church auxiliary. Also, to get out of having to file any financial reports with the IRS. If Trump were smart, he would declare himself a church so he could get people to stop clamoring for his tax reports.
Well, the young people have the right idea. Vote them out. And that's and if you're going to change all these policies and change the direction of this country. And I was very encouraged to read this statistic this week. If you're a woman and you want to run for office, you often consult Emily's List. And in the 2015-16 era, 900 women consulted with them. This year, since Trump's election, 26,000 women have consulted with Emily's List. Now, women only control 20% of the House, which puts the United States 99th in terms of world representation of women in legislatures. But now there are 400 women running for the House, mostly Democrats, 50 for the Senate, and 79 for governorships. Please take over.
And Andy is one of the few living men who is not afraid of giving up power.
Please, welcome it.
I know, me too. Young people, please.
Yes.
All right, well,
and a woman won this week in Kentucky. This was a district.
Another district.
She won a state legislative seat by 62%, where Trump had won 72% of the vote in Kentucky.
Very hard.
Now she was running against the widow of a pastor who committed suicide because he was caught molesting a kid.
I'll take it.
It has a little special thing like the Roy Moore
That's all right.
thing.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, let's run through some of these political stories.
Well, I think the big breakthrough this week was the Pennsylvania map, which has been settled by the state courts, forcing the Republicans to run on fairer districts.
They're suing over this, I believe.
Who are they going to sue? The Supreme Court already rejected an appeal on this.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're going to take another one.
I'm just saying they don't give up.
They don't. They want to impeach the judges.
But in hell freezing over news, in Alabama, a Senate committee has passed a bill to amend the sex education rules in Alabama to delete their current statement in their sex ed rules that says homosexuality is not acceptable to the general public and is a criminal offense. Now,
students were supposed to be taught that homosexuality is a lifestyle that they are not to embrace.
But they're deleting all that in Alabama, and they're bringing themselves up to date. Also, the out lesbian Patricia Todd, who has held a state House seat for many years as the only out person in the Alabama legislature, is retiring this year, and now there is a gay Marine running for her seat.
He is a project director at Birmingham AIDS Outreach.
In New York,
Neil Rafferty is his name.
In New York State, Governor Cuomo is fulfilling his promise to propose a ban on the panic defense being used in cases involving sexual orientation or transgender identity.
Yeah, somebody says, I picked up this prostitute, I discovered that she was a he, and I went crazy and I killed. Well, I mean, it sounds extremely offensive.
This guy came on to me, so I had to kill him.
I think we do have to look at the fact that people do become unhinged by things like that, and look at that.
Well, I think we
not
need
excuse it, but of course, but look at that.
Yeah, not excuse it and not use it as a legitimate defense.
Well,
In Jacksonville, Florida, the city attorney has rejected a proposed ballot vote that would kill their existing non-discrimination proposals around sexual orientation and gender identity.
In Starkville,
the city attorney said that that is a city council function, not something for the voters to weigh in on.
In Starkville, Mississippi, the local gays and others wanted to have their first Pride Parade, and they asked the city to participate in it, and the city council voted 4-3 against that. But they'll come back. I think they will come back and have it without the city, and I imagine they shouldn't have any trouble getting a permit for that. And if they do, the ACLU will be on their side, or Lambda, or GLAAD, or whoever else.
Not Liberty Council. You
never know, the First Amendment.
In Pennsylvania, the new Lehigh County executive has ordered a non-discrimination rule for the county for sexual orientation and gender identity, including contracts with businesses doing business with the county.
In Vermont, a trans woman, Christine Hallquist, is running for governor as a Democrat. They have a Republican governor up there, Phil Scott. She's the CEO of the Vermont Energy Company, and she's 61. Also running is Ethan Sonneborn, 13 years old. He would be the youngest governor by 20 years. He says, look this kid up online. He says he's running to oppose white nationalism and ensure protections for people of color and LGBT people.
13.
Oh, he's terrific, and he'd make a good governor, I'm sure.
And one of our frequent guests here on Gay USA, Melissa Sklarz, longtime trans activist, is running for a seat in the New York State Assembly from Queens.
Yeah, she's been a guest here. Yes,
yeah.
We love Melissa. She's running against an incumbent. Democrat.
In Kansas, the Republican Party of Kansas has adopted a resolution that they will in no way, under any circumstances, validate transgender identity. They're against it.
Okay.
And in South Carolina, the half a dozen Republican legislators have proposed a bill to redefine same-sex marriages as parity marriages.
And to prohibit the state from recognizing them or treating sexual orientation as a suspect class worthy of civil rights protections. Professor Arthur Leonard said this is a facial violation of the 14th Amendment.
In New Jersey, the new Democratic Governor Murphy has appointed longtime lesbian activist and first woman to graduate from West Point, Sue Fulton, as a commissioner of motor vehicles.
In
Georgia,
yeah,
a Senate committee
Judiciary Committee
has reinforced religious exemptions for adoption, even though they already exist, and this would be completely redundant.
Yeah, the religious agencies in Georgia have the ability to refuse. I think
Yes.
this would allow anybody who has a religious reason to deny adoption to gays.
Well, the best thing about this was that they did this while allowing no public comment at the hearing.
Yep, and this
Novel.
similar bill is advancing in Oklahoma.
I told you I was going to tell you about a new place for us to retire.
Please.
Nevada.
Okay.
My friend Derek Washington, longtime gay activist
Hot
in
there.
Nevada,
Hot.
has just become the first openly LGBT member of the Arts Commission of North Las Vegas. And I asked him what his agenda was on the Arts Commission. He said, you know, we're still fighting the housing crisis here. We have a lot of homes sitting empty. We don't have warehouses, but we have a lot of empty homes renting for $500 a month, and I want to fill them with artists. Can we be artists?
Sure.
We're sort of artistic
We
in
are.
doing this.
We
So,
are indeed.
Derek, save a couple of houses for us.
In New York, a woman is suing her father's estate for cutting her out of his $80 million will, and she says it's because I once walked in on him having sex with a man, and we didn't have a chance to reconcile. So she's trying to move the case to France, where you can't cut your children out because he lived there most of the time.
Didn't have a chance to reconcile. Does that mean that she rejected him after she walked in?
No. He rejected her because she had walked in on him.
Yeah.
He was mad because she saw him with a man.
Yeah.
And therefore became estranged from her.
If she was okay with that, wouldn't that have made them not
he was
estranged?
Embarrassed by it.
I understand, but embarrassed leads to estrangement?
This is a real estate guy named Vincent Dowling.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, did we do the Ninth Circuit ruling in California?
No.
You can't be fired for your sex life unless the state shows that it has a negative effect on your job performance. This is about a probation officer was fired for adultery with a fellow police officer, and she said it was off-duty conduct. The court agreed, and it could end up in the Supreme Court, and this would have great ramifications for LGBT people. The Fifth and Tenth Circuit say it's okay to fire police officers for adultery.
Yeah, there are sketchy cases like that all over. Seattle. Delvon Heckard, 47 years old, has died of an drug overdose. He was one of those who sued Mayor Ed Murray.
He was the first one to sue.
Yeah, for sexual abuse. Now, he claimed that Mayor Murray, who ended up, after denying a lot of these charges, resigning.
After 4 or 5 more charges.
Yes.
This is when he was younger, but he was having, allegedly, sex with minors.
Yes, paid sex. Enlighten me on how that qualifies as abuse.
Well, if any sex you have with someone who's a minor is rape under the law. It doesn't matter whether there's money exchanged or not.
Okay.
It's statutory rape.
Well, at any rate, Delvon had gotten a $150,000 settlement from the city when he sued, and he'd been clean at the time, but evidently went back to drug use and has now died of an overdose.
Yeah.
One of
the mayor, did deny all these things,
yes.
But he's out.
And perhaps the most fascinating story of the week comes from New York and Mount Sinai Hospital, which is a center of medical care for trans people. They do a lot of surgeries there and other care. So they have a trans woman born with a male body who wanted to breastfeed her partner's child.
Yep.
And so they, in fact, pumped her up with hormones and stimulated her breasts, and she has been breastfeeding the child successfully, and the child is now 6 months old and doing fine.
And this was developed by a nurse practitioner named Zill Goldstein, who is a trans activist at Mount Sinai, and a trans activist at Mount Sinai, who worked with Dr. Tamar Reisman on the procedure.
Now, I have read
it's a first in the medical literature.
Maybe so, but I can remember decades ago reading that, in fact, men were capable of breastfeeding. And so, to me, this confirms that, although at the time all they were talking about was, extensive stimulation of men's breasts to produce milk. This involved more.
They used an anti-nausea medication that is banned in the United States, but licensed in the United Kingdom and Canada.
And they were concerned about would the hormones show up in the breast milk and have some effect on the baby.
Did we do Charlton Green? You did Charlton Green?
No.
Okay, we should talk about Charlton Green.
Okay.
This is a man who in Georgia who was arrested for consensual sodomy in 1997. It was illegal then. It was illegal. Well, Georgia got rid of theirs before Lawrence v. Texas. But anyway. But he can't get off the sex offense registry. And last week, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals overturned a district court ruling in his favor. And what they're saying is there was someone else in the room, and that made it more of an offense. That when you had
it was group sex or something?
Yeah, but even that's not illegal now. But they will not take him off the sex offense registry. I mean, when they first decriminalized gay sex in England, there could be no one else in the house when you had sex in order for it to be legal.
Politicians obviously have too much time on their hands.
Yes, they do.
As they
sure-
sit around
they
and justify their existence by
They
thinking up
talk
stuff
about
like
us
this.
and the nanny state and the liberals.
Get a
but-
hobby.
Yeah.
Find something productive to do.
All right.
All right, moving on to international news.
Well, in Northern Ireland, the Secretary of State there says that the Northern Ireland legislature should be doing the same-sex marriage issue, but absent action, and they can't form a government up there right now because they're having a big dispute between the parties, the UK Parliament could legalize it and should.
Okay. Meanwhile, in Bermuda, where they have repealed same-sex marriage and replaced it with civil partnerships, the debate is how to react to that. Now, a lot of people want to boycott. Some guy who is a Bermudian but living in the United States has instituted a lawsuit.
Another guy who was had booked a Cunard, which is registered ship, the Queen, I think it's the Queen Mary II, had booked a big vacation there and says, I want my money back because they banned this, and Cunard won't give him his money back.
But meanwhile, Outright Action International, which is the big LGBT group that deals with international issues, says don't boycott Bermuda because the locals don't want you to. Now, this is the eternal argument that took place during apartheid and a lot of other...
And gay stuff in Africa.
Yeah, and gay stuff in this country. Do you boycott Florida over Anita Bryant? Do you...
Well, I remember when we boycotted Colorado over
Yeah.
Amendment 2 back in the 90s.
Yeah.
And the mayor of Denver came here where they had gay rights, but it was overturned by Amendment 2. And he said, do you think if you had a vote here in New York State, you would win? You know, and
well, I was part of a protest of the mayor where
Me too.
You were at that breakfast at the Regency Hotel.
I was at the breakfast in David Dinkins' office where he tried to dissuade us.
No, he was having
budge.
breakfast at the Regency at a power breakfast, and a bunch of us lesbian Avengers marched in. I had my cowboy hat on and, boycott the hate state and all of that, marched around the Regency. But yeah, I mean, it's a big debate. Do you go and make yourselves known, or and support the locals, or do you boycott and hurt the locals economically?
Well,
but
in apartheid,
for a bigger...
the African National Congress asked for a boycott.
Yeah, but not everybody in South Africa was crazy about that.
Certainly not.
Yeah. So anyway, that fight continues. Meanwhile, in better news, in New Zealand, they held a pride parade, and for the first time, the Prime Minister of New Zealand,
Jacinda Ardern,
marched in the parade. She's attended the parade before, but this was the first time she actually joined in the parade.
Yeah.
And
in Panama, a judge's draft ruling against marriage equality that was under consideration at the Supreme Court has been withdrawn. They're going to see if they're going to comply with the ruling of the Inter-American Court for Human Rights.
In Ghana, some cops saved some lesbians from a mob that was going to lynch them. Now, homosexuality is outlawed in Ghana, and the government is not nice to LGBT people. But in this case, when faced with a mob going after these lesbians, the cops jumped in and saved them.
Speaking of mobs, in Indonesia, it gets worse and worse. In a place called Depok, which is right outside of Jakarta and has like 1.3 million people, they now have an anti-LGBT task force to anticipate the spread of LGBT, they say, among young people. And it's going to involve social service workers and police and civil society groups as they make Indonesia an uncivil society.
You may have been mesmerized by the sight of the Olympian from Tonga, bare-chested in Seoul in 20-degree weather or whatever, and all oiled up. But meanwhile, a big, horrible cyclone was hitting Tonga, Cyclone Gita.
Look what it did to the LGBTI Youth Center and Shelter.
Yeah, not much of a shelter.
Damaged. If you get our emails, we'll tell you more about this whole situation.
Yeah. In Canada, a Nova Scotia court has overturned the conviction of an HIV-positive man who had been convicted of causing psychological harm to two women he had sex with.
Well, he says he used a condom and he told them.
Yeah, they say they were harmed psychologically nonetheless. the court
They didn't test
says,
positive. They didn't test positive.
No transmission. The court said that just because they were upset, that doesn't vitiate the fact that they gave consent to sex. So his conviction has been overturned.
Let the buyer beware.
In Peru, they have a couple of art exhibits up dealing with transgender and gender issues, and they've been attacked by right-wing protesters, including the Association. I can't do this with an accent.
The association.
Association Antonin Scalia. In Peru.
Is he a god in Peru?
I don't know, but they march under that title and they attack the art exhibits, which have not been shut down yet, but they're on shaky ground.
Hey, we've got good news from Russia, if you can imagine that. We told you about the journalist who broke the story about the persecutions of gay men in Chechnya. His name is Kudoberdi Nurmatov. He got court permission this week to go to Germany to emigrate. He faced deportation to his native Uzbekistan after fleeing to Russia to escape persecution, and he would face imprisonment and torture back home. That is him on the left there.
Yeah. And in Mexico City, there's an anti-LGBT candidate for mayor of Mexico City.
And there was a big demonstration against him, and we have a picture of it up there.
These are activists who have come out to file a complaint against him and demonstrate against him. In Nepal, a court has recognized a married lesbian couple, one Nepalese, one from the U.S., by granting the non-Nepalese half of the couple a non-tourist visa. They have recognized her as a spouse, even though same-sex marriage is not legal in Nepal yet.
And actor Russell Tovey, out gay, of course, is recognized that he wants to be married to his boyfriend, rugby player Steve Brockman. Tovey played a closeted soccer star in the movie The Pass this past year.
So now he's engaged to a rugby player.
There he is.
And UK jockey Victoria Smith has come out as trans. She won 250 races as her. What was her?
She's yeah.
She retired. She's a trainer now. She's going to continue to ride in charity events.
Wants to win again.
Yeah.
And in Russia, did we talk about the Russian election?
No.
It's March 17th to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. So millions of people are seeing an online video, obviously produced by the Putin people, saying if you don't vote, Russia could become a state where you are forced to tolerate gay people and forced to take in gay people when they have been abandoned by their partners. This is all acted out very in a, I suppose, a sophisticated way. This doesn't seem like the land that gave us Tolstoy.
All right, entertainment news. Well,
no AIDS news.
Do you have?
Well, CVS is being sued by its employees in California because they're insisting that the employees, if they want their HIV medication, have to get it at CVS retail stores when they could get it cheaper elsewhere. It's an outrage. This is a big pharma story, and in New York, financial regulators are investigating the denial of long-term insurance by people on PrEP.
Okay.
Against people on PrEP. Entertainment.
One of Andy's favorite plays of the year is coming back. Billy Crudup as Harry Clark to the Minetta Lane Theater starting March 7th for 10 weeks.
And Torch Song is coming back to Broadway in the same theater it was on Broadway at the Helen Hayes on November 1st with the cast of Michael Urie and Mercedes Ruehl.
We did go see Jerry Springer the Opera. I'd always been fascinated by the idea of this. It played in Britain first.
In National Theater, 2003.
Big controversial hit. Couldn't get it produced in New York except a concert version. So finally produced off Broadway. We'll give you a little flavor of it. This is the clean clip. And the kind of quiet clip.
So let me get this straight now. She says she's his. She says he's hers. And they say he's theirs. So I'm guessing you're saying he's yours. What is going on?
She said that he said that I said that I said that she said that he said that they said that he said we both said that she said that I said that you said something or other I forget. She said that he said that I said that she said that they said you said that I said that they said that we said that you said that we said that she said that he said that you said, he said that you said. Does it really matter? What? Does it really matter? What? 'Cause at the end of the day, I love you. I love you.
But most of the time they are singing in the basest language imaginable.
Yeah, you have to be willing to give up any sign of any thoughts of political correctness.
And then they have the second act is a descent into hell, and they bring on Jesus and Satan and Mary and Almighty God. And most of the audience seemed either amused or scandalized.
I don't know if they were scandalized.
Well, they were laughing
it's pretty cute.
in embarrassment.
It's cute. It's not deep. I wanted it to be a little more conscious of some kind of social significance, but really it's just cute and entertaining.
And there was some great singing, operatic
great
singing.
music, great singing.
Terrence Mann plays Jerry, and I think he does a good job. He's
Yeah.
a Broadway veteran. Jerry Springer, the opera.
Jeffrey
At the Pershing Square Signature Center.
Jeffrey Tambor is quite angry at being forced to leave Transparent over sexual harassment
Said he didn't
charges.
get a chance to defend himself. He would never cause harm to his fellow cast members. But Jill Soloway praised the trans actresses who came forward and for speaking out.
And a couple of Oscar moments. Daniela Vega, the trans woman who's the star of the Chile nominee for Best Foreign Language Film, is going to be a presenter at the Oscars.
Yep.
And the movie company is running a big campaign for the mudbound cinematographer, out lesbian Rachel Morrison. They have these billboards all over Hollywood. That's pretty unprecedented.
Yes, indeed.
And I saw an old movie this week, Born in Flames, which has just been released on video on Amazon and iTunes for online streaming. Born in Flames was done in 1983. It imagines a downtown New York world where a socialist revolution has taken place, led by the Women's Army. Flo Kennedy is in this. Catherine Bigelow, who won an Oscar for directing Zero Dark 30, is in this movie. And at the end of it, they set off a bomb on the top of the World Trade Center. It is crazy.
I would love to quote Flo Kennedy, but this is a family show.
Born in Flames, available on iTunes or Amazon.
I loved her, by the way, and she was a great supporter of the movement, our movement, and other movements.
Yeah,
Yes.
just a blast from the past of a crazy little movie.
We'll see you next week if we're still here. Actually, we're going to have a guest host next week.
We
yes?
are. Gabe Gonzalez will be sitting in.